Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching my Speculative Class Guide series for Larian Studios' upcoming Baldur's Gate 3. As noted, because Baldur's Gate 3 is not out yet and we don't know everything, this video is speculative. This is based off the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition ruleset, which Larian has said they're going to base their own ruleset off as closely as practical, so I feel pretty confident using it as a baseline for these videos. If you're unaware of any of the basic concepts around D&D or Baldur's Gate more generally, I have a tutorial kind of video about the basics of D&D that you can find right here, or in the description. But without further ado, today we're going to take a look at... The Druid is the protector of the wild. They can control the forces of nature, calling down and controlling the elements with powerful magic. They also use their link to the wildlife of Faerun to take on the shape of beasts, to great effect, whether it be ripping apart their foes with the teeth and claws of a wolf, or scanning out the room ahead as a tiny field mouse. As always, we'll start with the features of the Druid in order of acquisition, and then move on to some of my recommendations after. First off, with the base features, the Druid has a hit dice of a 1d8 per Druid level. This means that at the first level you have 8 hit points plus your Constitution modifier, and at every subsequent level you either roll a d8 or take the average of 5, add your Constitution modifier, and that's how many additional points you get per level up. As for proficiencies, they're proficient in light armor, medium armor, and shields, although it's worth noting that Druids will not wear armor or shields made of metal. This has always been a bit weird to me. I'm sure there's some kind of lore reason for this, but it doesn't really make sense because they are allowed to use metal in their weapons. As you can see here, proficiencies in weapons, they have clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaves, scimitars, sickles, slings, spears. If there's anyone in the comments that actually knows the reason why Druids can't wear armor made of metal or shields made of metal, but they can use weapons made of metal, let me know. It's a weird thing. Thematically, it would make sense to me if they didn't use metal at all. But the fact that they use metal in their weapons and not their armor and shields is very strange to me. But in any case, they also have proficiency in a herbalism kit, which is very thematically relevant, because, you know, druids, they're out in nature, all that kind of stuff. And their proficient saving throws are intelligent and wisdom. As for their skills, you get to choose 2 from Arcana, Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, and Survival. Quite a few to choose from, and you get to choose 2. Now, at first level, just by being a druid, you know Druidic. So you can speak and write Druidic. It's a language that's known only to the druids of Faerun, and you can use this as a way to leave simple messages around the world that can only be read by other druids. I'm really not sure how they're going to translate this into Baldur's Gate 3. I think a more likely scenario is if you run into a circle of druids, you'll be able to understand what they're saying and maybe talk with them better and get a better kind of rapport because you understand their language. Something like that. I don't really know how they would implement it otherwise, but we'll have to see. Also starting out, druids are spellcasters, as I said earlier. They use the same spellcasting system as the cleric, which is the prepared spell list. However, I am going to go over and explain this, assuming that any given viewer of this video hasn't watched my other class guides. So, like all magic classes, the druid has access to a set number of cantrips, determined by their level. There'll be a table up right now where you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. And cantrips are spells that you can use as much as you like. You can just continuously use cantrips as many times as you like. They also have a number of spell slots that determine how many spells they can cast before requiring a long rest. Druids also have a list of prepared spells, the number of which is determined by your wisdom modifier plus your druid level. This list is formed after each long rest, and it's made up of spells from all the possible spells a druid could know. I'm aware that this is a really wordy and relatively difficult concept to understand just from my description. As such, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll answer them as best as I can. But in essence, there is a list of spells that druids are allowed to cast. It's a big list, it's all the druid spells. Each day, you pull a subset of this list into a smaller list, and for that day, that's the spells that you can cast. Then, when you take a long rest, you can rewrite this list and make it with any other spells you like. So you kind of prepare for the day. That's how that works. Once again, any other questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them as best as I can, but we can move on. At level 2 as a druid, you get access to Wild Shape. This is the hallmark druid class ability. As an action, you can transform into a beast. You can do this 2 times per rest, either a short rest or a long rest. It resets on both. And up now, there's a list of how powerful an animal you can actually turn into based on your level. I'll really be interested to see what Larian does with these animal forms. Because in D&D, you can pretty much turn into anything you want. As long as it follows the requirements on the table, you're fine. I'm assuming that Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be more restrictive. Obviously, they can't include all the possible animals you can come. but I'll be interested to see just how expansive the list goes. It will be really interesting. For the specifics of wild shape, I'll have the in-depth rules on the screen right now. You can pause if you're interested in looking at them, sort of the in-depth rules, but I'll go over the important ones right now. For starters, you gain the physical stats, i.e. your strength, dexterity, and constitution of the animal you're taking the form of, but you keep your mental stats, so your intelligence, your wisdom, and your charisma. So you keep your mind, but your physical body is completely changed. Secondarily, if the beast form hits 0 hit points, you revert back to your normal form at the HP you had before you transformed. However, any overflow damage will hurt your normal form. So, let's say that you have 1 HP left and you're in a wolf form, and you get hit with 6 damage. The wolf will take 1 HP, which will take it down to 0. You'll then revert back to your normal form, and then take the additional 5 damage that is the overflow from the 6 damage you took originally. It's pretty obvious way how it works. Again, it's one of those things that's pretty hard to explain, but when you see what's happening, it makes perfect sense. Finally, you can't cast any spells while you're in your beast shape. However, if you cast a spell before going into beast shape, you can keep the concentration on that spell while you're transformed. There are a few more eccentricities in the rules there, but once again, you can pause and read through them if you want. They're relatively in-depth, as you can see on the screen right now. But also at level 2, you get to choose which druid circle you come from. This is essentially a subclass. There are 2 confirmed for Baldur's Gate 3. There's the Circle of the Land Druid and Circle of the Moon Druid. I'll go over both of them in a second. But at 4th level, again at 8th, you get the ability score improvement as or a feat. This is the same with all classes. That's actually all there is for the Druid. The rest of the abilities are all subclass abilities, so you don't get anything at level 6. That is, level 6, level 5, level 9, level 10 is all subclass given abilities. So we get to move straight onto the subclasses with the Circle of the Land. Circle of the Land Druids are all about the magic casting side of the Druid. They can still use Wild Shape, but their abilities really lend for casting really powerful spells all the time. They're much more a spell slinger than they are a Wild Shape focus. So starting at 2nd level when you choose this, you gain an additional Druid cantrip of your choice, and you also gain Natural Recovery. So during a short rest, you can commune with nature and regain some of your expended spell slots. They can only recover up to half your Druid level, rounded up, worth of slots. For example, if you're a 4th level Druid, you can recover either a 2nd level slot or 2 1st level slots. At 3rd level, and then again at 5th, 7th, and 9th, you gain extra spells added to the list that you can prepare from. So these spells are based on which region your Druid circle hails from. I won't go through all of them here because there's a lot of them, but I've got them on screen right now as you can see. Pause if you want to look through these. Essentially, like there's Arctic or there's Underdark, I think, or Forest, and depending on where you say your Druid is from, you'll get a additional chunk of spells that you can prepare each day. It's a really interesting way of doing it, to be honest. And next we have at level 6, you gain the Landstride feature, which enables you to move through difficult terrain as if it was just normal. It's unclear at this stage how Baldur's Gate 3 is actually going to implement difficult terrain, but for reference in D&D, what difficult terrain does is it just ordinarily halves your movement speed. So as a Circle of the Land Druid, you can move freely through it. That's a hard sentence to say, freely through it, at full speed rather than half speed. And then finally, at level 10 as a Circle of the Land Druid, you gain Nature's Ward. This makes you immune to all poison and disease, and prevents you from being charmed or frightened by either elemental or fey creatures. An example of an elemental creature would be like an Ifrit, which is a fire genie. An example of a fey creature would be fairies, for instance, for those unaware of what elemental or fey creatures are. But that's it. That'll take you to max level on Circle of the Land. Next, we have Circle of the Moon. If the Circle of the Land focuses on magic, the Circle of the Moon focuses hard on Wild Shape. When you take this circle at level 2, you gain Combat Wild Shape. What this allows you to do is when you use Wild Shape, it takes a bonus action rather than an action, which is really good. Additionally, you can use a bonus action to expend a spell slot to regain 1d8 HP per level of the spell slot used. What this means is, if you're in a wolf shape and you get hurt down to 1 HP, you can use a bonus action to expend one of your spell slots and recover HP so that your wolf is bulkier and doesn't die as quickly. It's also worth noting that when you're a Circle of the Moon Druid, the animal forms that you can take are also way better. Starting at 2nd level, when you use Wild Shape to transform into a beast, you can transform into a beast with a challenge rating as high as 1. So essentially you ignore, on this column, I'll put this slide back up again, but you ignore the CR column for the beast shape. You can just do it at level 1, a CR of 1, which is much more powerful beasts. You still have to abide by the other restrictions on that list, but you can have a much more powerful animal of that same restriction. And then starting at 6th level, you can transform into a beast with a challenge rating as high as your druid level divided by 3, rounded down. So what this means, at max level 10 in Baldur's Gate 3, you can transform into a beast that has a challenge rating of 3, which includes things like giant scorpions, a killer whale, assuming there's underwater areas, even an Ankylosaurus. Again, this is assuming Larian allows us to turn into dinosaurs, which, let's be honest, they probably won't, but a man can dream. I'd love to be an Ankylosaurus. Also at 6th level, you gain Primal Strike. This makes all of your attacks in beast form magical, which, now I'm saying it out loud, probably deserves more explanation than just that sentence, because that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense for the uninitiated. But some enemies in Dungeons & Dragons, and by extension Baldur's Gate 3, have resistance to mundane physical damage. So a regular sword will only do half damage to them, whereas a magical sword would do full damage. All this feature does is it makes it so that you bypass that relatively common defense on your teeth or your claws or whatever your wild-shaped weapon is. So it means that you can just hit things through that resistance. And finally, as a level 10 Circle of the Moon Druid, you can expend 2 uses of your wild shape to transform into an elemental rather than a beast. This is an amazing ability. Elementals of any element, if you do fire, water, earth, or air, are all going to be stronger and probably more versatile than any beast you can transform to, particularly at level 10. You do need to expend all your wild shape uses to do this, but you get a much more powerful form as a result. But that's it for the Druid features. As for my recommendations, as with the Cleric, Wisdom is your most useful ability for the Druid. It determines everything. It determines how good your spells are, it determines how many you can prepare per day, which helps with your versatility with your magic. Secondary stats, however, they're generally far less important on a Druid. As long as you have a good Wisdom, you're probably fine. The reason for this is that if you're using Wild Shape, all of your physical attributes, which are generally the ones you have as a secondary attribute, like Con or Dexterity, those attributes get replaced whenever you're in Wild Shape. So there's a lot of the time when you're going to be in combat that those abilities just, they're going to be replaced, so it doesn't matter what they are on your base creature, on your base character, because when you transform into the beast, they get replaced. Having said that, you can assign them pretty much however you want, as how you want that character to kind of function in the group. For example, if you want your druid to be like the main negotiator of the group, you could give their secondary scoring to charisma. That helps with a lot of persuasion and deception, all that kind of thing, so it's probably good to have on the person that you want as the talker of your group. It's interesting. For all in all, as long as you have a high wisdom, doesn't really matter. That's my perspective on the druid anyway. But that's going to be it for this video. So, if you liked the video, please leave a like. If you aren't subscribed already, please consider subscribing, because there's going to be more Baldur's Gate 3 things in the future. And as always, thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time. Bye guys.